Please note that this episode contains depictions and stories of siblings lost by homicide, suicide, and/or domestic violence. Some people may find these stories activating, triggering, and/or disturbing. Please see our show notes for additional resources and to understand the full content of the episode. Hi guys, welcome back to the Surviving Siblings podcast. Today I have another incredible bereaved sibling with me. Her name is Stacy. Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. It's always bittersweet, right? Happy to have you here, but also not, right? But today you're going to share your story and your grief journey and share a little bit about your sister, Katie Jo. So, Stacy, if you could start us off and tell us a little bit about your relationship with Katie and how you guys kind of grew up. Tell me a little bit about the dynamic and kind of clue us into that in the beginning.
All right. Well, Katie was born when I was 10 and a half years old in the 5th grade. So automatically she was just a baby doll. Like she was just a little doll to me. I loved giving her baths and kind of just being little mommy. And we'd have all these fun summer parties because my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we loved dressing Katie up as like the little clown, and she'd run around in her little walker, and it was like our preteen friends and then just little baby Katie. And, you know, like all of my friends, even to this day, they just remember her as baby Katie. Because, you know, when I graduated from high school, she was 8 years old, and I went off to college. So, my mother has been married multiple times. Katie's father is actually my stepfather that raised me since I was like 2 years old, I think is when my parents got married. So he's my dad. But, you know, when I graduated from high school and went off to college, my parents were going through a divorce at that time. Like I remember my mother sending me a picture of a divorce ring she bought herself. And it was the same day that O.J. Simpson was like, whatever, vindicated in court. Like it was that same day. So it's like,
oh my gosh, I think a lot of us remember that day too, right? It's like, wow.
Sometime in October of 1995, I think is when it was. But I was already at college. And so she had, after they got divorced, she got with this other man and they moved down to the San Antonio area. So Katie was, 9 years oldish at that time. I'm off at college. Our dad still lived up. We're from the Dallas area. So our dad still lived up in the Dallas area of Texas. And then mother moved down to San Antonio. So being that far away and that far removed age-wise, I remember like when I would go see my mother when Katie would be like a young teenager, or not even a young teenager, maybe like 11. I remember one time she got into my makeup and she was like using all of my stuff. And my mom got so mad at her. And I got so mad at her. And I was like, stay out of my stuff, you little brat, like whatever. She's like, my kids, I'm 20 years old, whatever. Right. She's like 10 years old or 11 years old. And she was like, I just don't know you. Like, I was just trying to like, she's like looking through my stuff, trying to get to know me because
oh my God.
She felt like she didn't know me because I was a grown adult and moved away. And so I think that moment in time was just such a wake up moment for me because it was just this little baby that I adored. And then suddenly I was not in her life regularly anymore. And so I did make an attempt to visit her and call her and, make sure I sent cards and letters and stuff like that. Cause I had come back from college and I was still living up in the Dallas area. So I did try to do that quite a bit more. And then when she was 14, 15, I had my son when I was 20 and I had my daughter when I was 25. And it was right after I had my daughter. So she would have been 15. My mother kept calling me and like telling me how bad she was doing in school. And she was just terrible. She's failing all the classes and blah, blah, blah. And I remember very distinctly, I was at my son's soccer game and he was like 5 years old. And I was like, you know what? How about you quit calling me and complaining about something I can't do anything about, just send her up here. I'll take care of it. You send her up here, she can live with me. And she did. And so
she just had the reaction of like, okay, or like, wow, because that's wow.
Completely relinquished. Which, you know, later on, it was kind of when Katie was doing better with me, she's like, oh, you just think you're, you know, the best mom ever. What I'm like, hey, did you want me to do this? And did you want her to fail? Like, what did you want? I don't know what you want me to do.
Right.
She never gave us any of the child support that my dad was sending. He didn't know that. It was a really difficult dynamic, but you know, I kind of got her back on the straight and narrow. She had joined the church youth group, which back then I was into that, and I'm not now, but that was really, really helpful for that station of life.
Yeah.
And she was just doing really well. She graduated from high school, and toward the end, she got in a little bit of trouble, and she actually went to stay with my other sister for not very long. But after she graduated high school, she ended up moving back down to San Antonio. I'm not sure if she lived with my mother, or I'm not 100% sure what was going on for a couple of years there, but I think she was living with my mother again. So anyway, you know, we were very, very close when she was a teenager. And of course, she was my little baby doll before I moved out when she was 8. And then as an adult, as a young adult, I would say 28, maybe her being 28. She was just having a lot of issues. I would say she's a chameleon. If she liked somebody and they were into something, she was into it. And not that it was like anything like drugs, but like if they like country music, well, she was a roper, you know, that kind of thing.
But I think a lot of people can relate to that, Stacy, though. Like a lot of people are like that, or a lot of people have siblings that are like that as well. And sometimes it was extreme for them, right? Where it would be like drugs or alcohol or whatever it was, right? For her, it was country music or working out or, you know, I know we're going to get into some of that stuff, but, you know, it's just a certain personality type that I think a lot of people can relate to. And sometimes you're just like, you gotta follow along a little bit because you're like, what are you into right now? You know, and I do find that happens in younger siblings too, in my opinion.
Her being the youngest, like our other sister is 8 years older than her, and I'm 10 and a half years older than her.
Yep.
So, you know, all of a sudden we're all gone and there's nobody left to blame for who did this. It was obviously you, like you're the only one here. So I know that she had a lot of problems really like truly loving herself. And I don't know why. She's very lovable. But I really feel like she spent so much time like trying to figure out who she was. And she tried a lot of things. Like a lot of people don't actually go out and like grab onto things and try different things. Like, am I this? Am I this? Am I this? They just kind of like look around for other people to like validate them. She was a person that would go out and like try it and say, is this me? Yes or no? No, bye, next. Or yes, I'm globbing onto this and we'll see where this goes.
We hope you're enjoying this incredible episode of the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. We'll be back in just a minute after hearing from our incredible sponsor. Are you passionate about making a difference in your community? Join us at the Peace Initiative, where we're dedicated to putting an end to abuse through community efforts. At the Peace Initiative, our mission is clear. We're here to educate our community about the extent and often deadly consequences of domestic violence. We believe in responding effectively through collaborative partnerships because together we can create lasting change. Through our programs and initiatives, we empower individuals to recognize the signs of abuse, support survivors, and work towards a free future from violence. We can't do it alone, though. Your support matters. Whether you volunteer your time, donate resources, or simply spread the word, your help makes a real difference in the lives of those affected by domestic violence. Visit our website at www.thepeaceinitiative.org to learn more about how you can get involved. Together, let's put an end to abuse and domestic violence through our community efforts. Join us at the Peace Initiative, where every action counts.
when she was 30. So this would have been 2017. She had jobs at 2 different gyms, and I think she ended up working at like the Gold's Gym, like the Venice Gold's Gym. I know she was teaching boxing, and like she met Mike Tyson. It was like Mike Tyson's gym or whatever, like just all this kind of cool stuff. She's
Just having a blast like you wanted her to have. Yeah.
She cut off all her hair, and then at some point she had extensions in her hair. It's just like, I'll change her hair more than anybody I've ever known. But still, I could see that she was doing well, but she was still cycling through that what makes me me and who am I kind of part of life. And we talk pretty regularly. And, Instagram, Facebook, and then talking on the phone, we'd email, whatever. And then when COVID happened, and I think between COVID and the president, things got a little crazy for her, especially being a gun person with the Democratic president.
Right.
And then she started sending me messages about like just the president taking away the guns. And
so she kind of shifted a little bit. You saw her kind of going in this direction. Yeah.
She did. And it made me think that somebody that she was around was being this way.
Because you've already told us.
Yes.
She was quite
a chameleon. So
she was a chameleon. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I even stalked like some Facebook pages of people that she was friends with. Like, are these people like that? And I really couldn't find anyone that seemed like they would be influencing her. So then I thought, okay, maybe it's just like cabin fever, and she's just like, she's frustrated. She can't work. And then, there was like riots and stuff, which I'm from a little town near Dallas, and that's where we were living. Which there was a mass shooting there a year ago, but before that, it felt like a relatively safe place. And she would send me things like, you don't know, you live in your safe little neighborhood, and I'm out here, and this is LA, and like people are just pulling guns on people on the side of the road, and it's terrifying, and there's nothing I can do. Like it's like she was scared and angry all at the same time. And I really didn't know what was like. I was asking like, what are you reading? Like, where are you getting your information from? She was like, the internet and blah. I'm like, okay, I don't know how to help you, because she was just very combative with me about this, because I am not a gun person. Like, we have a shotgun in our mule because we might have a bear in the woods that we live on 40 acres of woods.
But you guys live in the country, so yeah.
So we have a gun for that reason. Mostly it's used to shoot bobbleheads and pumpkins because we're not hunters. So I've never been a gun person. I will say, in fact, the first gun I ever actually saw with my own eyeballs in person, not in a case at a store, was when I was cleaning out her apartment, and it was her gun collection.
Wow.
And I had to get my stepdad to come handle that because it terrified me. It terrified me.
Mm-hmm.
But all her guns were there, so she was not armed. So anyway, I guess like
something's going on with her, Stacy. Like something's going on at this time. And she's operating when people, we know this, right? When people are sending messages like that or are acting, in that manner, they're operating out of fear. So it's very interesting that she's operating out of fear, which, to be fair, a lot of people at that time were operating out of fear, and rightfully so. But this is your sister, and you knew Katie Jo was not being Katie Jo. This was not the girl that was meant to go to California, like total hottie toddy sweetheart, So something had shifted. So when did you kind of did you ever start to uncover what was going on? Like what happened next in this? Because this is quite interesting that she's going to you, and obviously you're her trusted confidant, right? You've been this mama bear figure to her. You've done, so
her
many things.
Told her that I was her mother. Like,
right.
Like, your mother is not your mother. Your sister is your mother. I can hear you talking about your sister, and that is your mother. And
that's huge.
And she looked at me that way. And of course, I'm almost 11 years older than her, and I lived a lot of life, and I helped raise her. So, so I don't really know, she just kind of got mad at me. And then she stopped messaging me on Instagram, which is where we were having this whole conversation about LA and the president and the guns and all this. I'm like, what is happening? And that must have been like, I don't know. I have a whole timeline that I wrote out after she died to like see what did I miss. It's somewhere. I don't know where it is. But I want to say maybe that must have been like July or August of 2020. Yeah. And her birthday's in October. And so she had kind of quit. She had quit message. She quit messaging me at all. I did send her a couple of emails like, hey, just checking in, making sure everything's okay. She'd never reply. I'm like, okay. I called her on her birthday, and it said that the call couldn't go through. It was a bad phone number. So I went on Instagram to see if I could like send her a message there, and she had blocked me. And I went on Facebook, and she had blocked me. And I went on TikTok, she had blocked me. And then, I kind of like I would email her and be like, are you okay? What's going on? Where are you? She's like, oh, now you care about me. I'm like, what? So I don't really, something happened between January and December. Something happened in that year that she totally flipped who she was.
Right.
It wasn't right, but she still had me blocked from her phone. And so, she's an adult. So all I could really do was be like, well, she knows I'm here for her. She's never hesitated to ask for help.
Right.
And she obviously doesn't want me around right now. And I just have to accept that. I have my own family, my own children, my own job. I have a life to take care of too. And if she doesn't want me in hers for this time, then that's fine. She'll come back. And I knew she would, but she didn't. So she was killed by her boyfriend.
We're in 2021 now. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep, 2021 on her 34th birthday. And we know all of this now afterward because we had an amazing detective squad down in New Braunfels, Texas, and Comal County, Texas. The district attorney was incredible. So we found out all of this, later. And then talking to people who are mutual friends with them who were like shocked and just completely blown away, and obviously not questioning whose side they were on at all in any of this. But I didn't know these people. And it did turn out that her boyfriend, I actually had met him once. They had been off and on for about 10 years.
That was my next question for you, because I don't know if we've ever chatted about that, and definitely want all of you guys to hear about this. So she had known him for quite some time.
Long time. Yep.
Oh.
Actually, I took my son down to Austin for some music festival that he wanted to go to it was actually like Mother's Day weekend, I think, whatever year it was. And she was living down there at that time. And she was like, hey, can we come see you guys at the hotel? I'm like, hell yeah. So we saw her, and she brought this guy with. She was like, oh, this is my friend, whatever. We were like, oh, okay. And I didn't really remember that, but my son did. And he was like, is that the guy that we met when we went to see Mac DeMarco in Austin? I was like, oh my God, it is. It's the same guy. So, and this was, I don't know, my child was like 17 or 18, and he's 26 now. Yeah, 26. So they had been on and off for 10 years, going back and forth. And then once I was unblocked from her Facebook, when my mother turned it into a memorial page or whatever, I could see posts of hers with him and going out places with him and friends and going to bars and dancing and, hunting, just having a good time. He was like her, into guns, into hunting, had a lot of training, did stuff with the NRA, I think, as well. And that's just how they were. So they were both gym rats and they both love hunting and just guns in general. So, but what I did learn afterward was that he actually came to California and helped her pack and move back to Texas.
Wow, that's a big piece of information.
And I
Wow.
also found out that sometime right before COVID, maybe, he met her in Las Vegas with a couple of friends and they spent a weekend in Las Vegas hanging out. So he seemed very supportive of her to move. And at least from what she was posting, like, thank you for supporting me, man, whatever. And then he helped her move back. And I've seen things on her socials now that I'm just like gross.
Red flags. Mm-hmm.
So when we had her memorial, obviously she was going to get cremated, but because they had to do a medical examiner had to do the autopsy, her body was not there in time. So we just had like an empty jar, like an empty urn or whatever. But her body actually got there like that afternoon. So they called me because I had told them I want to see her before you put her in the oven. And they would only let me see her arm because she was so disfigured. And the arm that I could see was the one that had a tattoo with his name on it. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know she had
There's
that.
this whole year plus of her life that you just had no idea. Like,
Yeah.
it's all like, I feel like it's almost like a novel that we're telling here, Stacy, because it's like there's just every piece is starting to come together, but you're like, where do I fit it in the puzzle? And she's got this huge tattoo of his name, and you're like, I barely even had heard of this guy, but this had
Right.
got, it's crazy.
I mean, and I told him in my victim impact statement and the allocution when he was sentenced, I told him, I didn't even know your name. And I know that there's a reason that I didn't know your name.
Mm.
She was not proud to be with you. She was not proud to be your girlfriend. Because
Yeah.
if she was, I would know. Out of everybody in this whole room, I would know. And it's true. There was something, maybe she didn't show that to the people that she was around on the daily basis, but there was something in her mind and in her heart that she knew that something wasn't right, that she wasn't making a good choice because she did not tell me. And that sounds so selfish of me, but the history of our life together, I would know. I knew when she ran off and eloped with this guy and I took pictures of them and it was some rando. Like, I would know, right?
That was my point earlier, Stacy, and why I wanted to talk about this, because that when we, like I said, when we know something doesn't feel right, we tend to keep it from the people that we love and trust the most, which is interesting, right? And that evolves through time, because then we grow more mature and we learn to stop doing stuff like that. But initially, that's our reaction. Like, I remember myself being, when I was with a very abusive guy for many years when I was very young, I hid it. I hid all of the details from my parents, from my family for 7 years, and then even beyond that. So we do that because we know those are the people that, for better or worse, or if the relationship's good or bad, whatever, they love us the most. And that if they found out any of those details, so you were spot on with this, and this is a very important story to tell. And I want to go back, Stacy, because I want you to talk about the whole court experience, being, victim's advocate, all of that stuff, because this is something I get questions about all the time. I did not have that experience because of my story and everything that transpired. And I think it's really important that people like yourself share these parts of the story. But I want to go back to the hardest part of the story, when you lost Katie Jo. And can you tell us, obviously he took her life, but can you tell us what happened to the best of your knowledge, and how you got notified. And then we're going to move through kind of the court process and stuff, because you had a positive experience with the DA and with the court system, which is not always the case, right? So
positive, but it was pretty good. Yeah. But
yeah.
I'll share all those details.
Best as you could maybe wish for, right? After hearing some other stories. So
So
tell
I
us a
guess,
little bit about what happened when you lost her,
so
because
I
it
guess,
was,
yeah, to go in order would be getting notified first.
yeah.
So it was on October 27th. My phone was ringing. It was like 4:00 in the
Which is
morning.
that her birthday, Stacy?
Her birthday's the 26th. So she
Okay,
was,
so you got notified the day after her birthday, but she was killed on her birthday.
she was
Okay.
killed like 10:30 at night on her birthday.
Mm.
So my phone was ringing and I thought I was dreaming. And I remember now looking back, like it was probably ringing several times. And then finally somebody left a voicemail, so it makes that like other noise, and that noise woke me up. And then it was calling me like right away again. And it just said New Braunfels, which I know is a town in Texas. But I'm like, who do I know in New Braunfels? Like nobody. I don't know anybody down there. Like that's not where my mother lives. She lives like in some other little place south of San Antonio. It's like 30 minutes away or whatever. So I'm like, whatever. So I picked it up, and this guy, he said, he was like, my name is Detective Groff. I'm with the New Braunfels Police Department. And I was like, okay. And he said, do you know Kathleen Johnson? And I said, I do. She's my sister. And he said, does she go by Kathleen? And I said, no, she goes by Katie. And he said, okay, I think he was just trying to like make sure he had the right person or whatever. And he said,
Yeah, they asked those kind of fact-finding questions. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He said, so he said, I actually sent a deputy to your father's home a few hours ago. So at 1:00 in the morning, my father, who is like over 70 years old, has a deputy in his local town knocking on his door to give him this death notification. And after talking to my dad later that morning, he said, yeah, I told him I couldn't handle it and to call you. The reason that they called my dad was because he was saved as dad in her phone. She didn't have my mother in her phone, and she didn't have me listed as sister in her phone. I don't even know if I was in her phone, but obviously you don't list sister Stacy, like I'm a nun or something. So they called dad because that's the one thing that they could recognize this is probably a family member. But he gave them my number. And so I was like, okay. And he's like, I sent a deputy to your father's house, and he directed me to you. And I was like, okay, what's going on? He said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm just going to say the guy's name. He said, Clifton has murdered Katie. And I said, and I quote, and excuse my French, who the fuck is Clifton?
Because you didn't even know at this time. Yeah. I mean, like, who is this? Yeah.
No. Like, and
Wow.
even when he was introduced to me all those years ago, it was just Cliff, not Clifton.
Right.
So I was like, I don't even know who that is. And he was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I thought you would know who that is. We think it was her boyfriend. And I'm like, I have no idea who that is. Are you sure you're talking about Katie Joe? And he was like, yeah. He said, unfortunately, I am. I'm sorry to tell you in this way. I'm sorry that you don't know who that is. But I just wanted to make sure that someone in the immediate family knows. If you want me to call other family members, I will. Or if you want to call them, that's fine too. But I have your number, and we'll be in touch with you later today or tomorrow on some things. And I think it's crazy how fast you go into shock. Like your brain is like playing ping pong with itself. Like, this is not real. This is real. This is not real. This is real. Like, and you just suddenly I just had like this whiteout in my brain. Like, what is happening? And I got off the phone with a guy, and I remember my husband had woken up because he heard me on the phone at 4:30 in the morning. And he was like, what is going on? And I couldn't talk. I just like literally fell on the floor and started sobbing. And I'll tell you, this is really crazy. A week before that, literally 1 week. So I was working with a theater company, and I was a stage manager for a play that was about to open. And it was literally tech week, which is the worst week to not be able to be available in theater. But the week before that, I actually called in absent one night, and I lied. And I told the guy that there was something going on with my sister.
I have chills.
And
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And he was like, okay, no worries, take care of your business. And I spent a lot of time that night looking online and trying to call her and looking through emails, and just, it was literally exactly, it was the Tuesday a week prior. So it would be like the 19th or whatever.
Oh my
And I
God.
totally lied.
You knew something was going on. You knew.
I didn't go to rehearsal. I totally lied, but I spent that night like doing that.
But I don't think you lied. I think that's a thing that, like, it's hard to explain, but it's like you knew something was going on. Clearly it was, because if a week later this is all what transpired, right?
Yeah.
Clearly something was going on. Like, we just know, oh, it gives me chills. Gives me chills. Oh,
Well, I mean, and I think the next week when I had to call him and say what happened, his immediate thought went back and he was like, oh my gosh, is this related to last week? And I was
right.
like, yeah, I guess it is. So that was crazy. But anyway, so that morning, I spent trying to call my mother and my other sister, who for various and lovely reasons have me blocked on social media and apparently on their phones. But if you call somebody enough, even if they have your number blocked, if you call them enough, it finally lets you through to voicemail.
Right.
I think I called my mother 65 times before I even got through. And I finally got through to my other sister, who lived like half an hour away from me. She finally called me back, and I told her, and I said, do you want to call mom or do you want me to call her? And she's like, no, you call her. I'm like, okay. So I finally got in touch with my mother. I don't even remember what I said. I know I said Katie's dead, and she's there in New Braunfels. And I called my boss, and I packed a bag, and I got in my car, and somehow I drove 5 hours south. I don't remember the drive.
Don't even know how you got there, right? It's like, don't even know.
Nope. Went
Yeah.
straight to my mother's house, who I think I had not spoken to for 5+ years prior to this. My sister was also not speaking to her at the time of her death. A lot of just family drama dynamics, and people just trying to break cycles, I think.
Yeah.
But I went down there, and after I sobbed on the floor in my home, I don't think I cried again until I got back home, which was almost 2 weeks later, because I helped with all of the funeral stuff, the police stuff, cleaning out her apartment. Then the funeral happened and all these people came, and then I stayed a couple of extra days, but in a hotel, not with my mother, just kind of tying up loose ends and whatever. And then I came back home, and then so 2 weeks full off work before I went back. And it's very difficult, and maybe you had the same experience. It's very difficult to remember. I don't remember driving back home either, but even the days, the first few days back at home, I don't remember if I was sad or what. I don't remember what was happening, because I think I was in shock for probably a good 6 months, honestly. I think my brain stayed that way for a very long time.
I think a lot of you guys listening, and myself included, like, that was a experience for me too. And it took years for me to be able to tell my story, because I had to really force myself to go back and really recount what happened. And what you're describing, Stacy, is very much what I like. You're describing something that I think a lot of people can relate to too, is
this, we cry, we have this initial like shock and like cry and emotion, and then it's like, whoop, it like
Yep.
goes up. And then you're just like, you're in survival mode, really. And it's a fog survival mode, but it's not even like the first year fog. It's like way more intense than that. It's like you've got to go through, especially when you're, a lot of the eldest siblings go through this, but like, even if you are like the responsible one in the family, like you'll go through this. You have like these things you need to get done. Okay, we know they're dead. Now we need to know, are we getting a casket? Are we doing cremation? It's like it becomes very transactional. And so like I feel like your mind starts to just overwhelm yourself with that and go, okay, you're going into transaction mode.
Yeah.
Even though you're feeling so much, you just go into a numbness because you're like, I got to get this all done. I got to do all of these things. And like, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And like all that stuff's kind of like rattling around in your brain to speak to what you said earlier. And I think that is something that, you know, it shows strength, sure, but I think it's more just a testament to who you are as a person and like who you felt like you needed to be in the family unit. And sometimes it can kind of prolong your grief, because it did for me. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what you're describing as well. So I definitely
Yeah.
connect with that.
And I think also being in the no contact position with my mother and being kind of
Mm-hmm.
thrust back into that, I had an extra guard of emotions up, because I was like, I'm not safe to grieve here. I'm not safe to
Oh,
grieve.
for sure. Yeah. And there's a lot of people listening
That
that connect with
that
that
on top
too.
of it was just like extra. So I was like,
Right.
you're home, the police, like, what are we doing? Where's her stuff? What are we getting? When can we get this? Who's doing this? Where's the truck? What's
You
going on?
go in double protective mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, since she had never been married, she had no will. She was 34
Right.
years old. So my mother was automatically the executor of everything for her.
Mm-hmm.
So there were things I couldn't get done. I couldn't take care of certain things because I didn't have the rights, to
Which is
request that
so
information.
frustrating when you're the
Very,
one trying to get it done. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
it is. And, it was also, I think, equally sad for me and for everyone, I guess. But, my father is old, and his wife, like, he's her caregiver. Like, she's disabled and, has multiple cancer and heart attacks and all these things, and she's still kicking, but he's like her character. He could not travel with her 6 hours south to help with this, to attend he couldn't even come to the funeral. Like, we set
Well,
up a video so that he could watch the service or whatever, but it was just kind of a weapon that became a weapon, which is too bad. But it really solidifies a lot of choices that I made previously that are back into place now that this is over.
mhm.
But we took care of all that, and my therapy was on Fridays, because of my work. We have Flex Friday every other week, so every other week I have my Friday therapy scheduled so that I could do it on my day off. And so I went ahead, I texted my therapist, and I was like, so something happened.
So you were already in therapy, Stacey. I just want to make sure everyone understands that. So you were already doing therapy for like all of the family stuff that you had gone through, and then obviously now you lose Katie Joe, and this is like even more, right? So
So yeah, my children became adults, and I was terrified that I was going to be my mother and they would not want to be around me. So I
right.
started going to therapy to make sure that I wasn't going to be that, and I'm not. But yeah, so I already had a therapist that I had been seeing her for about a year and a half, I guess. So I did, and she was online, so I did get to meet with her, and I met with her in my car in front of my mother's house. So it was good to be able to have that little bit of pep talk, because what she had been working with me on was issues with my mother. So she could help me with that side of it while I was there dealing with the other shocking part of it. She kind
Okay.
of helped me with that little bit of oomph. So yeah, I don't really remember a lot. I did a lot of work.
It's a weird time, right? It's a very weird
Yeah,
time.
yeah, thinking, crying, listening to songs over and over again, watching videos, looking at messages, like I know it was for weeks and weeks, and there are times that I would just start bawling, and
Yep.
like my husband, so bless his heart, he's just like there 100%. And like, I just need to go outside and cry for a little bit,
Yeah.
whatever. And, he's 100% there. But yeah,
Which
it
I
was,
think is not always the case. That's another part of your story. So there's a couple things I want to point out to you, Stacy, is, sometimes a death like this, like losing a sibling, it can create kind of a wedge in your marriage. I've watched this happen with a lot of people, and a lot of people talk about this. Some of you guys have had this, or some of you guys have had really supportive partners like you, Stacy, right? Where they're like, I might not understand this from a first person perspective, but like I'm here for you. And it's just I wish I had a definition for why this happens, but it just does. Some people handle it very differently as being the support person. And I
Mhm.
think that's really amazing. And I think that it can, even though it's so difficult and it can pull you apart, but it can really bring you closer together. And, it shows you when you go through these difficult times in a relationship, it shows you where like the heart and soul of your relationship is. And I think it can be difficult sometimes for people to listen to, someone that goes through that experience and says like, yeah, my spouse was really there for me. But, you know, I've never seen it be anywhere in the middle, really. It's kind of one way or the other. It's
Right.
kind of, it's like family. It's like you talking about your family dynamic. And that's why I'm like really happy for you that you have this beautiful marriage and, a husband that's been so supportive. But I want to ask you something. I want to go back just a little bit and I want to ask you about this because the reality is Katie Jo was definitely in a domestic violence situation. I mean, this is how she was killed. This is how she was lost. Like, were there any, now that you're going through social media, now that you've looked back on all of this, and now that you've talked to, like, piecing all of this together, the, name is on the arm, all of this stuff, what do you think was happening? Kind of walk us through that because this is something we haven't talked about enough on this show is domestic violence. And this is something I want to bring even more awareness to because yes, she was shot, but this is a part of domestic violence. And I don't think this was the first, just me going out on a limb and knowing you. I doubt this was the first occurrence that happened between them that was probably abusive, I
Yeah.
would say. Right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he was physically abusive to her.
Right.
I will say that the tattoo on the arm was a red flag, big
Mm-hmm.
time. I am covered in tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
I started getting them the minute that I was legal to get them,
Yeah.
and I have always told my children and my sister, "Don't put somebody's name on you.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't do it. Not even your children. I don't want my children's name on. My children have tattoos that they picked out for me or they designed for me. That's what I have tattooed, not their name. I just don't. It's just not a for me. It's like don't this the permanence. Just don't do it. And I don't know why no one ever. I never had any experience with that, but I
It's
know
just your thing. It's
I
your gut. It's your thing.
I told her don't
Yeah.
put. And so when her tattoo that she had, it was like this beautiful like arm piece of roses, but his name was kind of like strategically the letters of his name were strategically placed in it. So it wasn't just like Clifton, it wasn't like that, but his name was within this tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that's what it was when I saw her arm because I had been able to see her Instagram or whatever, Facebook or
Mm-hmm.
something. I had seen something before during that week. Because a lot of people were sending us pictures and stuff like that we could use because she had us all blocked. So we couldn't access even looking at her stuff until Facebook, I guess, granted my mother permission to make it a memorial page. So anyway, that was a huge red flag. And I don't know what the answer is to the no contact is a huge red flag. When you are normally speaking with someone, even if it is just on their birthday or your birthday, if that passes and you don't, there's something going on. Like that is not okay. And I think when my birthday and her birthday had passed, it was like, something's not right. But I
Yeah.
don't know what you're supposed to do about it because I was blocked from everything. I didn't know where she was. the guy that she had lived with wasn't answering me, which, by the way, afterward, I met him that week that she died, and he had actually moved from California also, not with her, just for a different job opportunity. And he was so mortified. He was like, "I'm so sorry. I wish I would have told you. She told me not to tell you. She told me not to tell you where she is."
Wow.
So she was really trying to hide this.
Right. Which I think is one of the reasons I wanted to make sure we talked about this aspect of it, because that's a big red flag, right? Like doing things like, again, she looked at you as her mother figure. She got this tattoo that was not something that you would have supported. That's a red flag, right? But then there became these like waving red flags coming from like a ship coming in, right? Like, you're going no contact, and you and I are both not strangers to going no contact, but those are for different reasons. Like if someone wanted to speak to me and my family that I have no contact with and something was really wrong, I would speak to them. That's not, but just kind of falling off the face of the earth, you don't even know where they're
Right.
living, you don't know what's happening.
Like
Huge red flag.
my mother knows we're no contact because I have said we're no contact. I do not want to talk
The
to.
boundary, it's different.
It's a
And I
boundary.
think that's a huge part of your
Yeah.
story here with Katie Jo,
Yep.
Stacy, is that, that's a mega red flag when they just kind of fall off the face of the earth and you're
Yep.
like, wait a second, like they're trying to create some anonymous kind of reality for themselves, and it's kind of they're choosing who to share what with, and it's interesting, and I think it's an important story to tell because it's control is what is happening from the other person, and I think it's hard because you're never going to know. That's something that I think a lot of us who deal with homicide, suicide, so many different unknown types of losses, like we're never, domestic violence is in there because like you're dealing with multiple aspects, but domestic violence is definitely a part of this story, and you're never going to have all the answers, and that's such a hard thing. So how have you been able to move forward, because you're just over 2 years into your journey, Stacey, so how are you able to move forward not having all the answers? Because that's something I struggled with so bad. I know a lot of you guys struggle with that too, so I think this is such a huge question, especially for the way you lost Katie Jo.
Well, I really do feel like I have most of the answers.
Okay.
I don't have answers as to what concrete as to why she had kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. I know that she did still talk to my dad, but she also knew that he was safe and surface level and, oh, I love you. How's your day? Happy birthday. That kind of, like, he wasn't going to be probing into her life. He didn't know she had moved back to Texas either. He actually talked to her that day on her birthday. So she did answer when he called that day. So I don't have answers to that. I do know a few things, like she was getting involved in some really weird name it, claim it mega church and just kind of weird religious stuff. And I say weird because it was weird for her. We grew up Methodist, which is like super liberal religiousness. And I'm not religious. And she wasn't really religious either at the time that, at this time in her life. But this man, her boyfriend's boss, was part of the bench trial because he had texted him that night. He texted his boss something like, what do you do when you want to just kill a woman because it would be better for all of humanity, or something like that?
Oh my gosh.
And he was like, what? Like just said weird, like some weird things like that.
So he obviously testified, the boss.
He
Good.
did not testify because it was just a bench trial.
Got it.
He pled guilty, trial by just judge, but we did have a little bit of, witnesses or whatever. But his information was within the information that the DA presented, because he, handed over those messages or whatever. So he's kind of clued me in on a lot of things that were kind of going on with them because he was close with them. And unfortunately, his wife has the same name as my sister. literally first and last, and they changed their Facebook name to be like a married couple Facebook page, so it wasn't just her name because they felt so bad. But that's crazy in itself. But so I've learned a lot of things after. I do know that it was crazy. We went to I knew where they had been. I think from talking to the police, to the detective, we knew the last place they had been. So when my husband came down during the weekend for the funeral, we actually went to this little bar that they had been at. There was nobody there. It was literally empty except us. And I just was like, I just want to be where she was. So we sat down, we ordered some like pizza rolls and a beer, whatever. And this guy comes in, one of the bartenders, and he was like, hey, we need to call the manager. He said, the police said they're coming down to check something and they need him here like in the next 10 minutes. And she was like, oh, is this about that girl that got murdered?
And you guys are sitting there.
I'm sitting there and I looked at her and I was like, that was my sister. It just came out and her face was just like white as a ghost. And she was like, I am so sorry. I'm like, it's okay. That's actually, I'm just here because this was the last place she was. She was like, oh my God, I am so sorry. Like, she was so apologetic. But I mean, they had this bar that they were at had just like installed these HD cameras with sound and video, like literally a month before. So there was a lot of footage to go through from that night. But from what I know from the trial and what the DA presented there was a moment in time where my sister told Clifton, it's over, we're done. And they got in the car and left, and it was about not even a mile down the road between the bar and the highway. They turned off on this little road. And I guess there was a 4-way stop, and he stopped. He got out of the car, came around, opened the passenger door, and he shot her. And he shot her 20 times. He had like some weird extended clip or something. He hit her 19, shot 20. She ended up in the driver's seat trying to back away from him and probably from the force of just getting shot. And I went there to that intersection, and I laid flowers there. And it was just such a quiet little place, obviously a poor neighborhood, an old poor neighborhood. And just to think like the people in that community having to hear that at 10:30 at night, during the week, how terrifying that must have been.
Mm-hmm.
How terrifying it must have been for my sister. Like, she was dead when they got there. And I think I shared in the group that I had that video that somebody shared with me of him actually getting beanbagged by the police. He wouldn't put his gun down. Every report that they have says he was being belligerent and refusing to, put his weapon away or whatever.
Which is just clear evidence that he was not in his right state of mind, and there was definitely mental things going on there. And
saying like, I'm an American citizen, and they're like, okay, like, what do you like? So I know that they were both very intoxicated. But you
don't get to do that to somebody just because you're intoxicated. So no, that
no.
doesn't.
And if you're a responsible gun person, like they both were, apparently, you don't take your gun out with you to a bar when you know you're going to be drunk. You take an Uber and you keep your gun at home.
But I was going to say, well, we can even back up even more, right, girl? Like, we back up. You don't drive. You take an Uber.
Right,
you don't bring firearms with you. You don't, like, if you know you're going to a bar and you're not going to be the DD, like, come on. Like, come on. And clearly there was issues going on in the relationship. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just all... It all is such an eerie scene, but I really appreciate you sharing that with us because I think it's important, like a lot of people have come on here and shared a lot of details. And I think it just makes us, even though it's so hard to share it, it makes us feel less alone, even though every situation is so so different, but like we can all connect. But I think it's interesting too, Stacy, how you're able to kind of put yourself in that situation. And I think it shows a deep empathy in you. And you're like, look at this neighborhood. I can connect with you doing that because like that's how I am too with like my brother's story and with other people's stories too. And especially when I see a place where it happened or like it's very, it's indescribable. It's just like you're living it, you're in that moment. And I think it does take a certain level of empathy to really go there, whether that's good or bad. I don't know sometimes, right? That you're able to go that deep. Yeah.
It was just, I don't know. I stood there and I could just tell that it was a place that things would echo very loudly and like the sound
Right.
would just resonate over, I mean, and 20 times. Like I live out in the woods now and people hunt all around me. And all I find myself doing when I hear gunshots, like, cause it's, dawn to dusk, you can hunt. If somebody's shooting a gun, I'm counting. I'm just counting how many shots it is. My brain is still trying to understand what 20 gunshots sounds like,
I
And
don't I live in the city and I hear gunshots all the time. I'm with you. And I don't know that I've ever heard 20. Like that's very um it's a lot to really think about. I mean, like people, living in a major city, people be like, "Oh my God, I just heard 3 or 4 gunshots. Oh my God, I just heard 5 or 6. It's crazy." I'm like,
it's
20?
probably firecrackers.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's like 20, like that's a whole other level. There's definite intent there. And so when you obviously you guys went to court, it sounds like this was a pretty locked, signed, sealed, delivered situation for
Yeah.
you when you guys went through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They took him into custody that night. And they had posted, because, like you post mug shots or whatever in the Facebook groups, like the police scanner groups or whatever. And I think his initial bond was like 200,000 or 250,000 or something like that, something low. But they do that because they are looking at this person and saying, you don't have the resources to come up with 25K overnight. So this will be fine until somebody can look at it in the morning. So once because they initially just charged him with murder, like straight out murder. So in Texas, you've got murder and you've got capital murder. Capital murder is like in the commission of another felony or old person or a very young person or something like that. So it was just murder. And then when the district attorney looked at it the next morning, they upgraded it to murder 1 and a I don't know, like reckless use of firearms. It increased his bond or bail to, I think, 1.25 million. So there was just no way he was getting out. And he was in custody until he pled guilty, took a plea agreement. No, he did not take a plea agreement. He just pled guilty and asked for a bench trial. So the plea agreement was 50 years. In Texas, you have to serve half up to 30. So 30 would be the
Texas
max.
is a lot like Georgia. Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
So they
Mm-hmm.
had offered him 50 years, which would mean mandatory 25.
Right.
He did not take it. He did plead guilty. And the district attorney was like, okay, 60. We're going for the max because 30 would be, the minimum that he would have to serve. And that's what he got. He had people from his family testify on his behalf. He had the other on again, off again girlfriend testify on his behalf. His brother was talking like, I'll have a place for him to live and a job for him when he gets out. And I'm like,
I can't even imagine. I mean, as much as I love my siblings, like if something like that happened, I would be like, I'm sorry. I can't, there's just, I can't imagine. But then again, I've never been in that situation, but
and they were in such denial. Like he literally thought like maybe he was going to get out in like 5 years or something and he could just come live with his brother and work. I'm
well, he
like,
was probably thinking maybe a manslaughter charge, which
maybe.
is, what happened in my situation, which he completely curtailed out of because, it was such a horrific situation. But like your situation is a completely horrific situation. And like, but they got him. Like he was there. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys fled the scene with my brother. Like this, they got him. He's there. Like, dude, it's done. It's over. Like,
Holding the
yeah,
gun. Yeah. And
yeah.
I'm honestly and again, in my allocution, in my victim impact statement, I said that I'm grateful for you staying there and not just dumping her on the side of the road for everybody to wonder what happened.
Right.
Because he could have left. He could have left.
That's
But
what
he
happened
didn't.
to my brother. And so, yeah, I can understand. I think some people that aren't so familiar with homicide might say, like, why would you say something like that in your victim's advocate statement? But, like, it's weird things that you are grateful for that happen in those situations because you don't, I mean, you're never going to get justice because you're not going to get sweet Katie Joe back. It's just not going to happen. But, you know, getting him away from anybody else that he can harm for as long as possible is a gift, right? Like I mean, it's not her, but it's like, what gifts can we get from this is often what I say from grief and loss, especially traumatic loss like this. And so I can completely understand why you would say something like that, because I would say something very much like that too. Like, thanks for staying there, because at least you're behind bars for X amount of time and away
Right.
from hurting another sweet Katie Joe.
Like everyone knows what happened. Yeah. And he's already been through enough. I mean, it moved very quickly, even though a year, it felt like such a long time and it kept getting postponed. But, he was sentenced, right before Thanksgiving, I think. Yeah, it was right before
Yeah, so
Thanksgiving.
you were like a year on the dot, pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
And he's actually already been through his appellate attorney that was appointed, and they were like, yeah, you have no grounds for appeal. Bye.
Nah,
So,
man. Nah. Yeah. Stacey, I
sorry.
want to ask you a really important question about victims advocate statement. I know this is a little bit of a longer episode, but this is like something we get a lot. Um, do you I think I know your answer already, but there's some people that are quite hesitant to give a victim's advocate statement, right? Sometimes they're like, I don't want to go up there and see the guy or the girl that did this to my brother or my sister, or fill in the blank if you're listening and you're just grieving, right? In general, and it's a different situation for you. This is homicide or whatever, domestic violence, anything. This can fall into any of these categories. But I feel like with your personality, my personality, like we would never regret that. I didn't get that opportunity. I feel robbed of that opportunity. I sometimes feel like season 1 was kind of my victim's advocate statement, right?
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of you guys can understand that, but you were able to do your victim's advocate statement, and some people have mixed emotions about it. But I always tell people, I'm like, look, I didn't get to do it, and that's some of the reason I did season 1. What did I always say, do it. Like if there's something in you, even a little bit that's saying like I'm like, go for it, like do it. But I always want to get the advice of people who have gone through that process. Like, what was that like for you? I'm sure you don't have any regrets, but like what advice would you give to people that are maybe not as outspoken as us to do that, right?
I mean, honestly, if you don't even have the option of doing it, that's awful, and you should. And find an outlet. If you're given the opportunity, I would say write it out, and sleep on it, and read it to somebody that you trust. Even though I was not in a place of trust with the other people in my family, we did sit down and each read our impact statements. And I told my mother that hers was making her a victim. And this wasn't about us being victims. This is about the impact on the victims. So you don't need to have a statement that lets this person know that you are victimized by their crime, as much as just to speak your piece. And I started mine knowing that this person is a complete narcissist. I started my statement telling him how much I felt for him being locked away and not able to have Thanksgiving or Christmas or birthday with his family, and how awful it must be and lonely and all of those things. And then I just said, look at me. And then I just started talking, and I mean, I had it written out and it was long. But when I left the courtroom for the recess before the judge came back, the district attorney and 2 other people within the district attorney's office came to me, and they were like, that is literally the best victim impact statement I have ever heard. Oh my God. So my message to him was, I want you to know that I know. I know. You can lie. You can say you didn't remember. You can say that nothing else was going on. But I, Stacy, know what happened. And I know my sister. And I told him, I'm glad and angry that you were the last person to see her, because I hate that you were the last thing that she saw, but you absolutely deserve to be plagued with the memory of what she looked like in your truck with 20 bullets in her body to haunt your nightmares for the rest of your life. You absolutely deserve that. I mean, they let me see her arm only because she had been shot in the head, chest, arms, everything. Like, the cover over her body didn't look like there was a person under there.
Unimaginable. Yeah.
And I really did want to see her, but I guess I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because I do think that he's the one that deserves to be living with that haunting image, not me.
Yeah. I think there's so much power in your statement with that, Stacy, because I think that's another thing too that we have to remember with traumatic deaths like this too, is like you really in you're in such a shocked state of mind, and you're not really making decisions the way that you normally would, right? Not always logically. And so, you know, for you to say like that was the right decision, like I saw her arm, I knew it was her. Like that was also a part of the piece of the puzzle, was seeing the tattoo. You knew it was her though, and like that was enough for you. And you know, I say this a lot on the podcast, especially in my first season when I told my story, right? I think everybody needs a certain amount of answers. Some people need less, they don't want to know. Some people need a lot, they're like us. You know, like a lot of you guys listening, I'm sure are the same way. That's why you're listening to the show, I'm sure. But we all need a certain amount of answers, which I think, to go back just for a second to what you said earlier in the episode, where you're like, you feel like you got the answers that you needed. And that's the thing. That's what's so key, I think, on this journey of grief and loss, is you're able to move forward when you are like, okay, I've gotten enough answers, because you're not going to get justice. You're not going to get you're not going to know every, it's not going to be a movie. You're not going to get every, yeah, there's no closure. You have to get to a place where you're like, okay, I got the answers that I need. I'm okay with this. And like, you were able to sit there and look this guy in the face and be like, you get to sit with that, not me. You did this, and I think there's a lot of power in that. I really appreciate you, because I know that's very difficult to share that part of the story, but I get this question all the time about homicide and the victim's advocate statement. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because, do you do it? Do you not do it? And I always vote do it. Do it if you have the opportunity. But, it's, when these types of people that do these types of things, kill people, they're not empathetic, sympathetic, to your point, right? So you playing to that and just being like, I'm not feeling.
I wanted him to listen to me, so I played to it. But another thing is that when you have an advocate statement, and when you are saying, well, at least in Texas, they send you a victim package, and you fill it out, and it says, do you want to do an advocate statement or an impact statement? And then you say yes. You can send it to the district attorney, and the district attorney will present it to the judge for you. They will read it for you. You can have somebody else read it. So if somebody is too nervous or uncomfortable or scared or whatever it is, because it is hard to look somebody straight in the
Yes.
killed your sibling on purpose.
Yes.
It's terrifying. But I sat in the first row as close to this man as I could get, and my husband said, you were literally just laser focused watching this man the whole time. And the only thing that I really remember is every time his nervous foot would start shaking up and down, he was sitting like where his chair was. There was like a metal cover, like they do in carpeted rooms, where there's like a plug under it, but they cover with metal. And those chains around his ankles would hit that metal cover, and it would make a little noise, and then he'd stop.
Yeah.
And he'd try to move his feet, but he couldn't move far enough away. Like that noise is like ingrained in my brain.
Haunts you.
Anyway, that impact statement, there's not another opportunity to do that, because even if you're in a state where you can email or connect with an inmate, they don't have to read it. They don't have to respond to you. They don't have to acknowledge it at all. If you can get your statement out, and that's why I say write it out, let it sit, roll it around, read it to a friend, and then decide, do I want to do this? Can somebody else do this?
I love that advice, Stacy. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because
if
it's
your message
true.
can get where you want it to go, it doesn't really matter how it gets there, but you are not going to have another opportunity to do that
Right.
afterward. There's no guarantee that you will ever
I'd
have.
rather you do it scared than regret it. That's how I feel in life. Do it scared. And if that means like you're so freaked out and you have someone else read it, I still think you're so brave, because just putting those words down and putting it out there, I think it's huge. So thank you because most places you can do that, have somebody else read it. You're absolutely right. So I think that was really important that you did it. And I think it's important in your journey for sure.
Yeah,
So
it really is.
tell us a little bit about, I know we've got a little long on this episode, but there's just so much to unpack with your story, Stacy.
I'm a talker.
Tell us a little bit. No, it's a very complex story, right? And it's something, we've covered homicide before, obviously with my story, a couple other guests that have been on with really traumatic stories as well. But there's a domestic violence, aspect to this. There's an aspect of you getting involved, and being able to give your statement, and just things that aren't always possible. And so it's important that we talk about those things. But I want to talk about something that you guys have heard during this episode and talk about the Peace Initiative. Tell us a little bit about that and how that played into your sister's, obviously her life, but then also after we lost Katie Jo. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's a uplifting way to kind of carry us through the story.
Yeah.
For sure.
So the Peace Initiative is a local nonprofit in San Antonio, which is where she eventually, grew up for some of her life. And she was a person that supported a lot of causes. Her main cause was like wounded warriors, which I don't know. Maybe she just had a lot of veterans that she trained with or something like that. When she died, I was looking for a place that I could help support in that community that would kind of be relevant, I guess. Like, we put it on her obituary in lieu of flowers. But the Peace Initiative is, they do crisis and intervention, but they do education, not just with the public, not just women and children. They do education with the police, the district attorney's office, the sheriff's office. They do education on domestic violence and what it looks like. Like she told me when I was speaking with her the other day that the number one cause of domestic violence homicide down there is strangulation, which is terrifying. But they have to know that kind of thing because they are making sure that everybody knows that and what to look for and how to defend yourself and where to get help. And they offer a lot of resources. So they've been around, I think, since late 90s. I'm not 100% sure. But it is a local group, a very small nonprofit. I think there are 5 people that run this. And the statistics of people that they've helped and educated and speeches that they've done and classes and all these things. I wish that everyone knew that they existed. I wish that my sister knew that there was a place like that she could go to. And so I really I've done a couple of fundraisers for them and other people have as well in Katie's memory, just to, I want to get their name out there because it is a very big city of marginalized folks, and minority folks and poor folks and, people that don't necessarily even have like Facebook to go.
They don't have the resources to know and get the knowledge. Yeah.
So I really want, even if it's not them that is the help that somebody needs, they know exactly the right place to send somebody in that community. And San Antonio is a huge, huge town, huge city. and there's so many suburbs around. Like New Braunfels, it's down there. Like it's all down there in that general area. So if I say San Antonio, I'm talking about San Antonio proper, and then probably like 20 other little cities that half of them are Mexican words that I can't even say, because that part of, Texas is still very Mexican population heavy, Hispanic population heavy. Because, it used to be Mexico.
Right.
So, so it's a lot of work down there that they've done, and they do a great job. I'm really proud of the work that they do, and I've, really enjoyed speaking with them. And I want to make sure that if there is anybody in that area of the country, that they know that that's a resource for them. And if anybody's looking to help a resource like that, that's a place that is literally 5 people for the last 25 years.
They will take the help, I'm sure, right? If you want to give back, if domestic violence is something that you're passionate about and it's impacted you, or something that you're just passionate about, right? Like I'm passionate about it, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I love that. And even if you're not local to San Antonio, like you said, they can guide you in the right way, like how you can contribute in your local areas too. So I'm really excited that you're getting their name out here, Stacy, because it's really helping, it's going to help so many people, and then also grow them, which is cool. But, the most important part is it's a part of Katie Jo's story, and it needs to be told, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it needs to be told when we tell these stories. And so I really appreciate you supporting us and supporting them, because we like to bring these kinds of organizations together so that we can move to a more positive place, because it is really about having resources and knowledge to be able to overcome things like this. Yeah.
It really is. You're right. So,
Awesome. Well, you guys will hear about them. You'll get to click in the show notes and connect with them. And again, super excited that you decided to support them and support us. Stacy, tell us, kind of bring us home and close us out on the episode. This has been amazing. Thank you for being so open about this. Again, it's a question I get all the time, victims advocate, like the whole story, how the process goes. And you've been great with us. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? You're just over 2 years into your grief journey. We all know that, year 1 is such a fog. Year 2 is just pain. And then you're kind of coming out of it now. Anything that I missed, anything that you want to share with all of us surviving siblings, any knowledge, or any takeaways that maybe we missed during the conversation?
I think above everything, open and honest about everything that's going on is very important, because everyone has their own narrative. I wrote my sister's obituary, I wrote my sister's eulogy, and I wrote my victim impact statement. Those 3 things together were very cathartic, and I hand wrote them so that I had just that tactile situation of writing something like ink on paper with my favorite pen. And I kept them in there in my little box with all her stuff. But being open, not just with yourself. I think for myself, it kind of felt shitty, I guess, to say I hadn't talked to her in a year almost, because I hadn't been able to, because she didn't want me to, or whatever. Like, that's a really hard truth to sit with. But it's
how are you moving through that? Because it's something that comes up a lot too. Stacey, you're bringing up so many topics that come up. How are you moving through not being able to speak to her that you didn't speak? Because that's something I hear all the time too, right? When people write to me or come to group or come to TikTok or come to Instagram, they're like, I didn't speak to them for months, for years. Like, how are you moving through that? Because I feel like even in even the couple of months I've known you, you're moving through that. So can you share a little bit of that with us? That's hard.
It is. I feel like, again, when you're honest with yourself and when you're honest about everything that has happened, I know that I didn't talk to her because something bad was happening. She did not give me a way to help her. She did not give me an in to help her. She didn't let me contact her. I am confident that I could not have done anything else other than what I did and the communication I attempted. Calling the police to find out, like, can you even figure anything out? Like, I couldn't, there's nothing else I could have done, especially at the time that I didn't know where she was. So I have to be at peace with the fact that I love her. I know that she loved me and respected me. And I know that she was scared to disappoint or whatever she was scared to do with me. And there's nothing else I could have done. So you can't, what if, you know, you can look at, did I do this? Did I do this? Yeah, I did. This is what I did. This is all I could have done. So that's how I've gone through it. I'm not sure how that would go for somebody who isn't in that situation where they were like actively trying. But you just have to look back on what you did and know that no matter what, unless you killed your own sibling, their death is not your fault. No matter what, you didn't do anything to cause it unless you actually killed them.
Yeah.
Whether they were sick or murdered or accident or whatever, no matter what you did, unless you killed them, it's not your fault. And
I agree, Stacy, and I think that's how you eventually start to release that guilt, right?
What if yourself to death? But the fact of the matter is, you did what you did, and they did what they did, and it's over. And you have to just be settled with it. You can still write them letters. You can still think about them. I literally thought about calling her the other day to ask her who her ex-boyfriend was when I was thinking about, I wonder if this guy knows she died. I'm like,
yeah.
What? Like your brain?
That's grief brain, right? It's totally normal.
Grief brain, yeah. So like, it's always going to be there, and it's terrible. But I'm really appreciative of this group and this community and the small groups. It's so cathartic and healing, even just to tell your story, but also to hear other people's stories, so that you can be like, oh yes, oh my God, I feel that. And you know, I have told a few people that I was going to do this with you, and I realized that like 3 of them are friends of mine who have lost a sibling.
Oh wow!
I didn't even think about it. Like they weren't murdered; it was like they just died or whatever. But I think 1 suicide and 1 died, and two died. But I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that, because I don't talk about it.
Right.
I don't bring that up I don't bring it up all the time. I don't bring theirs up. I don't bring mine up. I'm not gonna. Right. I was giving out some bear traps for a very long time at the very beginning. People are assuming that I was gone for 2 weeks because I had COVID or, you know, whatever. And I'm like, no, nobody. But it's tough, and it lasts forever. But if you have good friends and good listeners, and people that can relate, you know, I was that one theater production that I was working on, I did actually go finish it, and it was the last one that I did. And there was a lady in the audience who was an actress that I've worked with before. And she said, hey, I just want to tell you that my sister was murdered 25 years ago. And I know what you're going through. And if you ever need to talk to somebody. And I'm just like, what?
Isn't it interesting, the people that come out of like literally the woodwork, and you're like, it's like, and it's in your everyday life. So it's really interesting. So I love that's crazy. And I've had so many experiences happen to me like that over the past 7 years too, Stacy. And it's like shook me, because it's not someone I ever would have thought, like you said, like this actress is there, and like, and it just, it's a testament to the fact that it's so important that we do tell our story, and that we do open up, and that we do share, because you never know who's gone through something similar to you. Just like we never know.
Especially because there's not a word for it. There's not a word for what we are. We are a big sister who lost a little brother, or a younger sister who lost a big brother, or whatever you are. You're not like a widow. You know, like there's not a word for it. So there's not a group for it. And I'm very surprised at the amount of people that I see coming into sibling loss groups who are like, my brother died yesterday. And I'm like, the last thing I 2 years later, I'm like, I wonder if there's any groups about loss of your sibling. Like 2
Yep.
years. These people are like, yesterday my brother died. I'm like, holy crap. Like maybe I'm just old. I'm 46. So maybe I'm just so old I don't realize that exists. I'm like, I'm on
I mean,
Facebook.
I feel the same way, Stacey. I'm like, I'm in shock, and like I'm in awe, and like there, there's people in our support group that you're a part of too, our monthly support that we do, where like they're have anticipatory grief. Some of them just lost, and I'm like, I'm blown away by them. I'm like, you guys inspire me. Like I wasn't even ready to open this whole thing up until 5 years. So like I'm totally inspired. So I think also it's, that's another part of this where, grief has its own timeline. There's some people that are ready, they think, the day it happens or the day after, or sometimes it's 20 years down the pike. It's whatever's going to work for you. So I appreciate you being open and honest about that too. Stacy, where you can find us chatting in group, right? They can join us in group. And I think, you're in our private Facebook group too, right, Stacy?
Yes, I think I am.
Okay, perfect. So if someone wants to connect with you, join our group. We'd love to see you there. It's a very small, we like to keep it small, but we'll let you in. We'll let you in. So Stacy, thank you so much. Any last pieces of advice for siblings going through such a tragic event of losing another sibling?
Just to not ever expect that wave of grief to be gone forever, because it's not. It's going to hit you, and it's okay. Go in a closet and cry and get it out and come back to life and move forward, and just expect that it's going to happen, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen always. And it's okay that it happens, because somebody that you thought you'd have forever and ever is gone. And your brain and your heart are going to grieve that forever. So
true. Stacy, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this and supporting us and supporting the Peace Initiative. We really appreciate it. This has been awesome.